Welcome back to The Fight with Tom White. I'm breaking down KSW 120 from the Polsat Plus Arena in Gdynia, Poland. Before we even get into the fights, I've got to talk about the pacing of this event, because I've always said that boxing's got a lot to learn from mixed martial arts when it comes to the pacing. And this KSW 120 event was the perfect example of what I'm talking about. Because the time between someone winning their fight, doing the post-fight interview, and the next fighters walking to the cage was pretty much perfect. Probably like 4 minutes, maybe 5 minutes. Like just enough time to like get a drink or go to the toilet or whatever you do when you're watching fights without feeling like you just wanting to go on your phone or whatever, get distracted. It wasn't so rushed that it cheapened the ring walks, but it wasn't like a grueling, boring wait like you often get with boxing events, with like the pundits talking for like half an hour. I think KSW might honestly have the best pacing I've ever seen across the UFC, across Oktagon, and others. So like hats off to their operational team, right? So let's get into the fights, starting with the co-main event that had me personally the most hyped. It was Szpilka versus Sakai, or Sakai versus Szpilka, and it was kind of a crossover fight given Szpilka's fame in the boxing world and in Poland in general. If you haven't seen Szpilka's documentary on the Polish version of Netflix, then use a VPN and check it out, because he's a really fascinating bloke, and I was just totally rooting for him because I've recently watched it. So Szpilka crossed over a couple of years ago from boxing, and immediately you could see that his movement was a bit different to the fighters you normally see. He was light on his feet, bouncing around, almost like a heavier, slightly less coordinated, older Dmitry Bivol or something, which is a compliment, of course. And in the first round, he was definitely completely dominant. He landed a great shot that dropped Sakai, and then he later rocked him again, dropping him for a second time while throwing in a bit of showboating for the crowd. He actually threw a kick and he missed and fell on his arse. Sakai is much more of a grappler, and it changed the tone of the fight in the second round. He got Szpilka to the ground with a punch, actually, that literally knocked Szpilka's gum shield out. And then Sakai dominated him on the mat for the rest of that round. The mat, the canvas, whatever you want to call it. So the third round was a bit lighter on action, maybe a little bit too much mutual respect between the two fighters, but it went to the scorecards anyway, and I think I scored like they did the first round for Szpilka and the third, and the second for Sakai. And it meant Szpilka got the unanimous decision. Some whinging online, but I don't know how you can argue with that result. And you have to give him all the credit in the world, right? Because boxers very rarely cross over into MMA successfully. It's almost always the other way around. Like the boxers fighting the MMA fighters in boxing rules. And yeah, casuals might point out that Szpilka lost to Deontay Wilder about 10 years ago and Derek Chisora a few years ago. But those are like elite guys in the grand scheme of things. They're not the elite of the elite, but they are top level boxers. So to step into a serious organisation like KSW in your late 30s and do as well as he's doing is really impressive. Moving to the other co-main event and the final fight of the night, it was the light heavyweight title fight. The champion, Rafał Haratyk, was making his second defence against the number one contender and a hometown hero, Bartosz Leśko, both from Poland. But first off, a quick shout out to the English language commentary duo. Will Vanders, who's British, like he really knows his stuff and he keeps it kind of light-hearted and entertaining. And you've got this American guy, Chris Hoekstra, I think is how you pronounce his surname, and he gives these very educated, level-headed breakdowns, and they balance off each other perfectly. And for me, like they elevate the broadcast for international fans. It's fun to listen to. Now onto the fight itself. It was a solid, gritty battle. Leśko landed an elbow strike in the first round that would have dropped a lot of guys, but Haratyk is just a tough man. He's as tough as they come. That's kind of like his superpower. Well, I'll be totally honest, I've never been that impressed with Haratyk, considering he's a champion. Like, he's not a Porsche, he's not a Ferrari, he's like a really, really top spec, like Ford Ranger or something. Like, he doesn't do anything overly complicated or biomechanically difficult for himself. He just does the basics and what works for him really well. He cruises at his own pace, let's say, but it works for him. And man, like, he also takes like just too much punishment. It can't be good for you. So Leśko was pulling off the better work and he was looking impressive. Haratyk did smash and drop Leśko in the fourth though, turning up the pressure a bit, but Leśko survived. Both guys were bloody by the fifth round, and I would say Leśko definitely finished the fight fresher and stronger with more gas in the tank, I would say. But it went to the scorecards, and I actually wasn't sure who'd get the decision. So Leśko took that unanimous decision and is the new KSW light heavyweight champion. So good for him. Given the history between these two, and that this was a second fight, I would imagine a trilogy is the natural conclusion to this, probably sometime next year. Going down the card, we had the number one bantamweight contender, Poland's Sebastian Przybysz, against Latvia's Edgars Skrīvers. Sorry about the pronunciations, these are difficult names. This was a pretty methodical victory for Przybysz. I'd say 80 to 90% of the fight took place on the feet, stand up. He was very chess matchy, both did very high level operators. And because the skill gap was pretty evident, it wasn't the most action packed brawl. Sebastian's talent just kind of shone through, and he managed to give himself a relatively easy night at the office. What I liked most actually was the respect, because when two fighters recognise each other's elite skills, it kind of makes for great sportsmanship, even if there was bad blood, and I'm not sure there was. Like, these two shook hands afterwards and showed absolute like dignity after the fight. And that respect and mutual admiration was a nice contrast to the fight just before it, which featured a bit of a sore winner and maybe a sore loser. I didn't really see what had happened. Purely from a fighting standpoint though, it was a real treat for Jiu-Jitsu fans. So it featured Adam Niedźwiedź, who is on the Polish national grappling team. But he's actually a former boxer who discovered Jiu-Jitsu later on in his early life. And he was going up against local Gdynia fighter, Mateusz Pawlik. So both guys 32 and roughly evenly matched physically in terms of their height and reach and so on. And given Niedźwiedzi's pedigree, I expected a quick submission. Surprisingly, both guys committed to standing up and fighting on the feet for the first round, mostly, showing off some pretty good kickboxing skills. But eventually, no surprises, the grappling did take over. And by the second round, Niedźwiedź had dropped Pawlik and spent the rest of the fight relentlessly applying top pressure from half mount or half guard, however you want to call it. Pawlik was just absorbing the punishment in an absolute war of attrition, a one-way war of attrition. Niedźwiedź dominated from the top to secure a clear, unanimous decision. Before I started doing jiu-jitsu recently, I might have found a lot of the ground fighting in a fight like this boring. But now that I'm starting to understand the mechanics of it, it's genuinely fascinating to watch. I really like these fights now. And to wrap up, let's talk about the flyweight matchup between Poland's Laura Grzyb and Brazil's Rayla Nascimento. So I've been honest before and said that I've never been really a massive fan of women's MMA. Well, I wasn't until Oktagon's Lucia Jabova completely won me over earlier this year. Full convert. And now I really look forward to these women's bouts because they bring something else. It's a sort of more frenetic energy. So coming into this, I wanted to see if Nascimento could bring that kind of Brazilian ground game to the table. And she absolutely did. She won in the second round via a rear naked choke. The first round, it featured a bit more 50-50 boxing, a bit more of a stand-up affair. But Nascimento didn't just steamroll Grzyb. It was competitive when it was on the feet. Coming from a boxing background where undercard fights are often 80-20 mismatches, it's very refreshing to see MMA matchmakers put together genuine 50-50 fights. It's easier because it's centralised, all the fighters are under one umbrella. But it's fair, it's exciting, and it keeps the sport honest, at least on a promotion to promotion level. So, an incredibly solid event from KSW. As for what's next on my radar, next weekend we've got some boxing. So Tyson Fury is having an away sort of fight against Mariusz Vach, a bizarre fight, over in Thailand on Friday. And then Anthony Joshua's fighting on Saturday against this Christian Prenga guy. I'm not hugely invested, to be perfectly honest, in either fight. I'll be blunt. But I'll almost certainly tune in to at least the AJ fight to see where he's at. What I'm also looking forward to is Oktagon 92 on the 1st of August in 2 weeks' time. So, Lucia Zhabova is defending one of her titles, bantamweight, I think. She's also got the flyweight championship off the top of my head. And also Ireland's Will Fleury, who's also one of their 2-division champions, is defending his heavyweight belt just 6 weeks after he defended his light heavyweight one. Which is pretty crazy considering how grueling training camps are, but fair play to him. But that's it from me. Let me know what you thought of KSW 120 down in the comments. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.